as a gift. There's no, that's one thing about money. Money does not come as a gift. It always has conditions. What the IMF is telling us we would end up doing is something that we could have done even before the IMF told us, because that's exactly what needs to be done. In order for us to fix what's going on with the debt issue, we need to cut expenses. There are two ways on a government P&L that you deal with these things. Either you increase revenue, that means you tax people more, and you as well as I know that Zambians are already overtaxed. So that's a non-starter. So if you're running a company, if you can't increase revenue, you only have certain things left, and that is cutting expenses. So people are saying, oh, the IMF comes with conditions. I don't think it's just their conditions. Any analyst, anybody with any ounce of financial education will tell you that even before the IMF, we were already saying this 2015, 2016. We were advocating for expenditure cuts. That same year, Parliament increased, I think it was salaries for MPs. MPs were buying new cars and all that stuff. And we are saying, look at the jet. The president has been talking about the jet. You are buying something 3 times its price. Look at the fire trucks. You are buying something 4 times its price. And we were saying we need to cut expenditures because you already knew any type of projections you did in 2016, and we argued for this, we would end up in this situation. And I used to say this to Zambians. The government always borrows money by placing the Zambian people as collateral. So if you allow the Zambian government to continue borrowing money, believe me, you will end up paying for it. There's only one person that pays for Nkongole, and that's a Zambian. You see, and we were discussing these issues even when we were in the opposition. You need to stop borrowing. People were saying, no, we are borrowing for infrastructure, we are borrowing for this, we are borrowing for that. But my brother, if I'm borrowing money, I need to invest in something that's going to pay for that money and give me a tiny profit. That's sensible investment. But if you look at our tax revenues, we've borrowed over the last 10 years, we've borrowed close to about 12 billion. That's almost, the PF government found the debt infrastructure about 2 billion, and it went to 12 billion, you see. That's almost $1 billion every year. Did we see a simultaneous increase in tax revenue to justify such borrowing? Because if you're borrowing money, if your tax revenue was at $7 billion, if you borrow $12 billion, your tax revenue should be at $14 billion. You see? But we never saw that simultaneous increase in tax revenue. We are seeing the debt go up, but we're not seeing revenue go up. You see what I'm saying? So that's not the right borrowing. If we're going to borrow money, we need to see a simultaneous increase in revenue. So that means that the new $1 billion that we borrow is bringing in maybe 200 million. That will pay for interest and servicing, and also give the government some money to invest in social sectors.
Your administration has already announced, intentions to borrow.
Yes.
As well, they want to invest in infrastructure. Something that the Patriotic Front did in the last 10 years, like you mentioned. And why should we continue as a country borrowing and continue mounting these infrastructures? And now we've been told that we need more high schools. Once that money comes, do you think that is profitable? That's why others are accusing you that possibly, like today I heard someone from that's from DP saying you are using the script that was left by the Patriotic Front to govern the country. No. We can never use the script that was being used by PF. The borrow. No. That's why they were infrastructure development. No, that's why they were voted out. We can't use that. But at the same time, you have to understand that when we borrow money, we have to make an assessment of areas that we feel we can create revenue.
If you borrow money to to build a building, right, and you put a business in that building that fails to pay for that building, you're still investing in infrastructure, right? If I borrow money to do exactly the same thing you're doing, but I am a better businessman than you, and I put a business that actually ends up paying for the building and the loan, we still both invested in infrastructure, but I'm more successful than you are. You see, that's the difference. The issue is not that the PF, when PF says we were building these things, we were doing these things. No, infrastructure development is a critical element to the development of any society. The question is this: do I build a road where 10 cars pass, or I build a road where 50,000 cars are passing every day? You see, both are infrastructure investments. But in my analysis, I feel that I will leave the road that only has 10 cars, and I will go to the one that has 50,000 cars, because when I put 3 toll gates, I will make enough money to pay for the loans for that infrastructure development. So I think the difference between UPND and PF is that we are going to leverage each and every dollar or kwacha to make sure that it brings value to the country.
Part of the advice from some people are saying possibly the UPND you could have done better if you went to employ, for example, new teachers, new health workers, use that money and begin to employ them with these already built infrastructures that were built by the Patriotic Front. But why should we continue building more schools? Really, when I can further bring it to your attention that if you went in some areas like the rural areas, there is a deficit of teachers, for example.
Yes.
So why should we continue building more schools and yet we are failing to sustain them with human resource?
Yes,
That makes sense.
I am individually lobbying on the other side.
Yeah.
So my view is that there are certain areas where we need more nurses, and there are certain areas where we need more teachers. And without a doubt, I definitely agree with you. I personally would rather start spending money employing people that are going to be spending money in the economy when we pay them salaries, which increases our tax base. So. And like I was telling you, one of the things that in UPND that we pride ourselves on is lobbying for specific direction. So certain leaders can come up with an idea, but it's up to us to say, let's shift it towards this side. I've been lobbying for an increase in education and health expenses, because those are the 2 sectors that directly affect the most vulnerable people in our society. So we need to push more money into these sectors. Whether we push money towards infrastructure as opposed to hiring more teachers, that's something that we have to debate and discuss. And we have to look at the numbers, because again, remember, we may have a lot of teachers, but if we're trying to send these teachers to an area where there are no schools, what comes first? It's not the employment of teachers, it's the construction of new schools. So I don't think it's a general philosophy that we're just going to be building schools. No, you build schools and you need to staff them, you see. So those 2 things I don't think should be considered mutually exclusive. To build new schools means more teachers. And we need to reconcile that, because we don't want to overcrowd Lusaka with a lot of teachers because that's the only area that has schools. No, we want some of these teachers to start going into areas that don't have schools, but we need to build those schools. So the right thought process over this is not that the UPND government is prioritizing building schools as opposed to employing teachers. No, these 2 things are together. You build a new school, you build a new clinic, then you bring in nurses and teachers to run those institutions.
All right. Still, someone would still argue, because someone will still maintain to say we already have existing schools that are empty without teachers.
And those,
why should we continue building more?
No, those need.
That's the basis of my question.
No, those need to be stuffed without a doubt.
Exactly.
It's a logical thing. It's a logical thing.
All right, let's move on, Mr. Mtonga. As we are still discussing the debt situation in our country, I do remember very well there was a time when President H.H. Wallace in the opposition, he critically criticized the then government, the PF, when it decided to engage in Razad as our consultant in restructuring our debt. I remember at some point he offered himself.
Yes.
I'm available.
Yes.
I'm a very successful businessman, and also I know how these figures, works.
Yes.
So if you want, I can offer for free. I can give you that consultant for
I
free.
remember that vividly.
Remember,
In
right?
fact, we were the people saying that, hey guys, PF, just hire us, we'll do the job.
Exactly.
Yes.
But today we have seen Bali, moving up and about, conversing, going to other countries,
Only one country.
Fine.
The president has only gone, and the president's visit to the United States was an obligation.
Indeed.
It was not canvassing. He had to be there because there was a UN meeting.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Visiting or meeting various world leaders.
Yes.
And according to him, the benefits that he went for there, according to him, sooner or later will start benefiting as a country.
Yes.
And part of it will be the issue of debt restructuring.
Yes.
Does it mean that he can't restructure the debt himself? Not until we need to engage in other, stakeholders?
Well, the very idea of debt restructuring means that you have to deal with other people, because the president does not, the Zambian government doesn't owe the president money. We owe other people. We need to engage those people for them to consider debt restructuring. And the idea with debt restructuring is that we're not running away from the $12 billion. We owe that money, we have to pay. However, you have to understand the current economic environment. Interest rates are extremely low. If we borrowed this money before COVID, we were running an 8% on USD denominated Eurobonds. My brother, if there's somebody willing to give me $1 billion at 4%, why wouldn't I take that money, pay off the debt that has a high interest rate, and now I've lowered my debt servicing? You see, it's simply an academic concept. It's not political whatsoever. Companies do it, we do it, everybody should do it. You go and borrow money from a loan shark at 50% before you had a job, right? And then you get a job, and then the bank says, we will give you the same money at 10%. Wouldn't you get money from the bank, go pay off the loan shark so that you're not giving him too much interest, and now you have lower costs of borrowing? And that's what the government is leveraging. It's purely an academic concept. If anybody has taken a class in finance, you are taught to do that. The moment interest rates go down, you refinance your debt.
And in the actual sense, we can simply say that the culture of borrowing continues.
Remember, borrowing is not a problem. Borrowing has never been the issue. The United States borrows money every day. UK borrows money every day. The very idea of borrowing is growth. But how you do it makes the difference. I'm not going to borrow $12 billion and allow it to take up 40% of my tax revenue. Then I'm not going to be left with money to handle education, handle health, and all that stuff. So I think people should stay away from the idea that borrowing is wrong. No, borrowing is not wrong. You have to borrow and invest in your country. The differentiating factor is, are we borrowing for consumption, or we are borrowing for areas that are going to actually increase our tax revenue?
Do you have an idea on how government intends to settle domestic debt as well? Because much of the talks we only discuss, external debt.
Yes.
Let's talk about our own.
Well, it's the same concept.
Same concept.
It's the same concept. Right. If I'm borrowing money within Zambia, chances are that The only issue that I have with borrowing money domestically is that we are taking away that liquidity from the private sector. So personally, I would rather focus on borrowing money externally because I'm bringing in liquidity in the country. Whereas if I'm borrowing domestically, I'm actually taking money from businessmen, businesswomen who should be getting that money. So if I was creating this policy, I would want to reduce on domestic borrowing and increase external borrowing. Think of it like this. If you put water in a bucket, that bucket will only increase in terms of volume of water when water outside comes into that bucket. But if we're just dealing with the same water in the bucket, you're literally just moving water. Nothing is going on. So borrowing from the domestic side within the country doesn't necessarily add value because it takes away from the private sector getting liquidity to continue expanding their businesses. So ideologically, I don't support high levels of domestic borrowing. I certainly support having more than 70% of our debt being external as opposed to domestic.
Right. There is a cry out there, Mr. Mtonga. I'm sure you are aware. You've moved in various places, more especially for some of us that sometimes we take off our neckties and just get into the compound, let's say Kanyama and Kanchiria, for example, a village, among others. We've got our mothers, our sisters, as well as fathers, grandmothers, that are complaining that the cost of living is too high up to now.
Yes.
And remember, President H.H. Wallace in the opposition, again, he made an emphasis. So when we form government as UPND, we are going to prioritize that the cost of living is at least reduced. All right? But today, a month and some weeks, the cost of living or commodities are still high.
Yes.
You know, and this is actually posing a danger to most of the people because if you talk about the issues of maybe inflation has reduced, the kwacha has gained or regained, whatever, a commoner will not understand those things.
Yes.
What they want to know or to hear is when they go to the shop or the market to see maybe tomato which they were buying at 2 kwacha coming maybe to 15 kwacha, for example.
Yes.
But still more things are still stagnant.
And that's just the unfortunate reality where running an economy is sort of an equation that needs to be in place. So on the one hand, before you start seeing inflation go down, you need to deal with this debt infrastructure, meaning that people need to perceive you a certain way. Therefore, the president has to be in the USA and present this new Zambia. You see what I'm saying? So everything is tied. So each and every step that the president is taking is tied to this idea of lowering costs and making Zambia a better place for everybody. But the equation has to be done in a certain way because you don't want today prices go down, tomorrow prices go up. So there are certain fundamentals that have to be in place so that we can sustain single-digit inflation. 100 kwacha from 2011 is buying what you were buying in with 100 kwacha in 2011. You need 1,000 kwacha today. This is not a political issue. This is a national issue. And it requires the right mindset and less politics, honestly, because there's a formula to fixing that. So the less politics we throw to this issue, the chances of our coming out on the better side. Lowering costs is not about politics. It's about fundamentals. The president, if you bought your inputs at $100, right, and you decide to sell your product at 120, the president can't tell you to sell your product at $90. The fact is that your inputs cost $100. However, the president can create the conditions where your inputs now go below 80, which allows you to still make the same profit, but sell your products lower. You see? So we have to create that environment. We can't force individuals to price their products at a level that doesn't make sense.
Right.
However, we can create an environment that starts pushing prices organically. Remember, we're a free market. The president can't come out and say, from now on, you should be selling a bag of meal for 20 kwacha. That's not the type of economy we are in. We need the private sector to create those conditions such that they can still find value in selling their products and services at a lower price.
Right.
Again, like I said, everything is attached to a specific equation. So the president focusing on figuring out how to fix the debt, directly actually, not even indirectly, directly correlates to inflation coming down. Because those are components that lead to inflation going up. So if you continue increasing your debt, it does affect inflation.
All right.
Yeah, exactly.
Finally, how do you hope to fight the corruption? You've been accused that you are too slow in fighting this corruption. You know, we used to have people that were serving in the previous administration. You've still maintained them up to now. You know, others are saying, don't you think these people are maybe sabotaging your work or your vision?
One of the things I feel strongly is that you have to create a culture that shows that politicians are not in charge of prosecution.
Right.
You see, you don't, because your UPND does not suddenly give you the prosecutory powers to start going after people because you think they are corrupt. There are institutions designed for that. Unfortunately, they have their own paths. Because remember, UPND is not the only party that will be in government. If we don't strengthen these institutions to act independently of politicians, then you will find that while UPND is in power, our own members may be doing things against the law, but the institutions are powerless to go after our members because we've created a culture where they can only move when we tell them to move. And the president has continuously, and it was even in a press release, there's a culture that has to be built. And unfortunately, there has to be, you have to let the institutions do their job. Because once you do that, then that means people shouldn't have to wait for justice to happen. People shouldn't have to wait for PF to be out of power, for the anti-corruption unit to address corruption issues. Same thing with UPND members. You don't want UPND to be out of power for these institutions to address corruption, you see. So meaning we cannot direct institutions on what they're supposed to do. We can have an overall theme of being anti-corruption, but we have to respect our institutions and know that they will achieve what they need to achieve.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Mtonga, allow me to appreciate you for coming, and it's not my fault that we have to end here, but it's because of lack of democracy in the studio. And my director tells me we have to go. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
We'll call you back.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, dear viewers, we end our discussion here. My guest this evening has been George Mtonga, UPND member in the USA. These are people that are really fought very hard to ensure that the new dawn leader is finally or is here today to govern the affairs of Zambia. Allow me to appreciate my camera person in the studio, Christopher. Thank you so much, as usual. My producer, Mavtopiri, thank you very much. To you, the people of Zambia, like I always say, may God bless Zambia, may God bless Mother Africa. Good night.